We're now just 10 days out from the movie opening, and honestly, who knows what it'll do once it hits theaters and how the world decides to receive it. But cast your mind back to when a movie spent an hour and 47 minutes hiding the answer to its own mystery in plain sight, right there on screen the whole time. The audience sat there convinced they were simply following a story, and the only reason any of them figured out what was really going on is because the film eventually stopped and told them. Well, that was The Sixth Sense, the 1999 movie that made an entire generation stare a little too long at hallway shadows, whisper nervously about twist endings, and suddenly treat every quiet kid like he might be hiding something. Quick setup for the three people who've somehow dodged this one for 30 years. Bruce Willis plays Malcolm Crowe, a Philadelphia child psychologist who takes on Cole, played by Haley Joel Osment, a terrified 9-year-old who won't say what's wrong, and then he says it. He sees dead people, and they won't leave him alone. And then comes the ending that quietly rewired a whole generation. Directed by M. Night Shyamalan, and rounding out the main cast are Toni Collette and Olivia Williams. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts about this movie that you probably didn't know. Stick around for number 1 because Willis did not exactly arrive here the usual Hollywood way. But before we get into it, hit that like button and subscribe to remember when it helps YouTube show this to more people who also had no clue what was coming. Alright, keep the night light on, and let's go shrink the shrink. Number 15. He gave himself a role, and then basically fired himself. Night Shyamalan is in this movie. If you remember him at all, he's the doctor examining Cole after the closet incident, in the room with Toni Collette while the questions about Cole's injuries get very uncomfortable very fast. Originally, that role was much bigger. Shyamalan wrote himself real dialogue, real tension, and actual reason to be there. But then he watched himself act and decided he wasn't good enough. So, he cut it down to a few seconds most people never register as the director. Directors trimming their own cameos is nothing new. The twist here is why. No studio notes, no outside pressure. He just sat in the editing bay, watched himself next to Collette, and figured the scene was better off with less of him in it. The scene now runs almost entirely on her, which is exactly right. Sometimes the smartest directing choice is pointing the camera at your lead and getting out of the way. Number 14. The whole thing started with a kid talking to empty air. Before the script existed, before casting, before the twist, there was a wake at someone's house. Shyamalan was there. Adults in dark clothes, food laid out, the usual setting. But off to the side, he noticed a kid sitting alone on a staircase, having a full conversation with the air. Every adult read it the same way. Strange kid, doesn't get death yet. But Shyamalan asked a different question. What if the kid understood it better than everybody else? What if that space wasn't empty? What if the person everyone was mourning was actually sitting right there on the stairs? That image fed one of the movie's most important scenes, Cole at the Collins wake, carrying a message the adults don't even know they need. The ghosts are scary, sure, but the real gut punch is watching a kid beg the world to listen and get treated like a problem instead. All of that from one child on a staircase, while every adult in the room looked the wrong way. Number 13. They wanted real breath, so everyone got to freeze. Every time an angry ghost shows up, the temperature drops and the movie tells you the simplest way it can. You can see everyone's breath, cold air hanging in the frame, tipping you off before anyone on screen reacts. Today you'd add that with a computer. Shyamalan went the other way. The breath is real because the actors were actually freezing. The crew sealed the sets in plastic and pumped in air cold enough to drop the room below freezing. That tense scene where Cole's hiding and Kyra finds him, those kids were genuinely cold. Part of it was that CGI breath wasn't there yet in '99 and Shyamalan didn't trust it, but the bigger payoff is that freezing your cast changes how they carry themselves, and that tension lands on screen in a way you can't fake. Number 12. There was almost a whole hospital wing full of ghosts. At one point, the movie nearly abandoned its quiet restraint entirely and threw an entire hospital wing of ghosts right at your face. This was the confession scene, where Cole finally tells Malcolm what he sees. In the finished film, it's small. A dark room, low voices, a terrified kid, and a psychologist who still thinks he's the adult in charge. Perfectly uncomfortable. The original cut had far less restraint. Shyamalan shot a moment where Cole looks out the hospital window at the wing across from him, and every single window has a ghost standing in it. Then he cut the whole thing. Good call, too. The boy's face does everything that footage was reaching for, without shattering the quiet the scene runs on. Sometimes less really is more, especially when more is dozens of dead people staring through hospital windows. Number 11. Misha Barton's vomit was cereal, which somehow makes it worse. Barton's only in the movie for a few minutes, and she uses every second of it to ruin your evening. Kyra appears in Cole's tent, tilts her head, and throws up on him. The vomit was breakfast cereal, mixed by the crew to the right texture. Barton held it in her mouth and let it go on cue. She later said the options were cereal or banana. Best part, Barton hadn't told some of her friends she was even in the movie, so one of them caught it cold, no warning, and immediately bolted from the theater, briefly convinced they'd just watched their friend die on camera. Which raises some questions about that friend's grasp of how movies get made. Number 10. She kept waking up at 1:11, 3:33, and 4:44 every night. Toni Collette was staying alone in a Philadelphia hotel during her shoot, spending her days playing a mother watching her child fall apart and not knowing why, then heading back to an empty room every night. At some point, she started waking up in the middle of the night, and every time, the clock beside her bed showed the same kind of repeating pattern, 1:11, 3:33, 4:44, night after night. As she's discussed directly, it rattled her enough that she leaned hard into meditation to get through the rest of filming. Stranger still, by her own account, she didn't fully register she was in a horror movie until weeks in, when she passed the editing bay and caught them cutting the Kyra ghost scene. She thought she was shooting an intense family drama about a woman and her troubled son. The genre snuck up on her, and by the time it landed, she was already waking to those numbers alone in a city she didn't live in, every single night. Number 9. The movie keeps warning you with red. Once you notice it, you can't unsee it. It's everywhere, and every time it means something. A ghost is near, death is near, or the floor is about to drop out. Shyamalan runs it through the whole film without blinking. The red doorknob on the basement door Malcolm can't open. The red balloon drifting up the stairwell right before a spirit locks Cole in a closet at the birthday party. Cole's tent, his one supposed safe spot, glowing red and turning out to be anything but. Kyra's mother, the one person at the reception not in black, standing there in red. Your conscious mind misses it the first time through, but your nervous system doesn't. Then you rewatch and realize the movie's been color-coding the dread the whole time. Number 8. The first draft was a totally different movie. The Sixth Sense went through draft after draft before Shyamalan had anything he'd show a soul, and the early version has almost nothing in common with what ended up on screen. Malcolm wasn't a child psychologist, he was a burnout crime scene photographer, spending his days shooting the worst things people do to each other, and the whole thing was a serial killer story straight out of Silence of the Lambs. Here's the setup. Malcolm's at Parents' Day at his kid's school and spots a crayon drawing that matches the signature of a killer whose scenes he'd been photographing. He lifts the paper to see who drew it. It's his own son. Then came the realization he was basically remaking Silence of the Lambs. Somewhere in the middle of all those rewrites, everything turned, and that's when he found the movie we know, twist and all. Malcolm dead the entire time. A crime scene photographer chasing a killer became a child psychologist trying to save a terrified boy. Quick pause if "I see dead people" just ran through your head unprompted. Welcome, you're among friends. Hit that like button and subscribe and drop a comment. What's the moment that actually got you? Or are you one of those people who insists they saw the whole thing coming? I know those people exist, we see them in the comments. I don't believe them, but I do see them. All right. Back to Philly, the city of ghostly and brotherly love. Number 7. Mikey Cole auditioned like Cole was having a pretty good week. Cole needed a very specific kind of performance, not kid looks scared. Anybody can do wide eyes and heavy breathing. Cole needed to feel tired, like a little old man who'd already seen too much and still had math homework due. Mikey Cole had reportedly auditioned for the part around age 10. Hello, my name is Mikey. I'm an actor, and I'm with ICM Talent. It was his first film audition, and he had no idea what the movie was actually about, so he read Cole's darkest, most broken scenes like a kid having a great week. He caught the finished film later and was apparently a little startled by what it turned out to be, which might be the most fitting detail in this whole story. Haley Joel Osment did the opposite. He read the whole script twice before walking in, understood the grief and the loneliness and the not being heard, and wore a tie to the audition, the only kid there who did. There's even a story that on set, when Osment couldn't get to tears, someone barked lines off camera to shock a real reaction out of him, and it worked. Number 6. Donnie Wahlberg lost 43 pounds for just a couple of minutes of screen time. Wahlberg plays Vincent Gray, Malcolm's former patient, and a living warning of what Cole could become if nobody reaches him. He turns up at the start, gaunt and shaking and coming apart at the seams. Then he's gone. To get there, Wahlberg starved off 43 pounds. The story goes he told Shyamalan he dropped some weight for the part, and Shyamalan figured he meant 5 or 10 pounds, but Wahlberg showed up looking like the movie had been haunting him for 6 months. At the time, he was still mostly known as the New Kids on the Block guy, so this was a serious pivot. There's also a patch of premature white in Vincent's hair, echoing Cole's own situation, a small scar from a life spent seeing what nobody else could. The performance lands before he even says much. Number 5. Bruce Willis practiced writing with the wrong hand for one shot. The missing wedding ring is the hinge the whole twist hangs on. At the end, when Anna drops it, Malcolm finally sees what we all missed. The ring was never on his finger, not once. The movie covers it with its own logic. Ghosts see what they want to see, and Malcolm chose not to look. For that to work, the absent ring had to slip past you for 2 hours, mostly by keeping his left hand out of frame. But one scene caused a problem, a close-up of Malcolm taking notes during an evaluation, hands fully in frame, lit front and center. Bruce Willis is left-handed, so his bare left hand would have owned the shot, which for a movie built on nobody noticing that ring is a non-starter. So the story goes Shyamalan had Willis learn to write legibly with his right hand, not fake it, actually do it, because it was landing in close-up under full lights. A ridiculous amount of effort for a detail almost nobody noticed, which is exactly why it worked. Number 4. Disney bought the script, lost faith, and watched the money go elsewhere. David Vogel was a top production executive at Disney when this script crossed his desk. His marching orders were family movies for younger audiences, but instead he read a ghost story about a dead therapist helping a terrified kid and bought it anyway, reportedly for around $3 million, making sure Shyamalan would direct. When the higher-ups saw what he'd committed to, Vogel was out the door not long after. So Disney owned a script one of its executives had staked a standing on, then lost the guy who fought for it, and decided the whole thing was too risky to fully back. By the time Willis signed on, this wasn't a tiny ghost story anymore. It was a roughly $40 million movie from an unproven director, with Willis working outside his action hero lane. So Disney brought in Spyglass Entertainment to carry much of the risk, handing away a massive slice of the upside. The movie made $672.8 million worldwide, the second highest grossing film of that year, and Disney gave most of it away because they didn't believe in the script that had already cost them one of their own. Sometimes Hollywood is its own worst enemy, and the people running the numbers are the last ones in the room to figure that out. Number 3. Toni Collette auditioned bald, so Shyamalan hid the tape. Collette walked into the read for Lynn Sear with no hair. She'd shaved her head, and Shyamalan wasn't even sure whether it was for a role or just for fun. I remember we were doing camera tests, and this blonde wig had been made for me. Either way, she showed up to a major studio audition looking nothing like what the executives pictured for the exhausted single mom in a ghost thriller. But then she read, and Shyamalan knew it on the spot. So he did the obvious thing. Hid the audition tape from Disney, figuring executives would see a bald woman, make up their minds, and pass. He kept the footage to himself and sold her by name instead, pointing to Muriel's wedding. Somehow it worked, and she got the part. But her hair still hadn't grown back, so into a wig she went. An Oscar-nominated performance delivered in a wig by an actress whose own director kept her audition tape from the people signing the checks. Number 2. The 4 words that almost tipped their own hand. I see dead people. 4 words whispered in a tent that became one of the most quoted lines of the year, maybe in all of cinema. Plenty of people who've never seen the movie can still rattle it off. It outgrew the film completely. What almost got tampered with wasn't the line itself, but the shot right after. The camera pushes in on Malcolm's face, and the story goes that's what made them nervous. Would the audience notice the camera suddenly caring so much about Malcolm's reaction? Would someone connect the dots right there and blow the ending early? They talked about softening it, trim the push-in, pull back, don't hold so long. Then they ran test screenings and watched the room for the tell, the gasp, the murmur, the one person who clearly clocked it. Nobody did. The audience stayed with Cole, watching a scared kid finally tell the truth to the one adult willing to listen. So they left the shot exactly as it was, and later, when Anna dropped the ring, that same audience finally understood what they'd been sitting with the entire time. Number 1. Bruce Willis did not choose this movie. He didn't land in The Sixth Sense on some perfect artistic instinct. He landed on it because of, well, kinda mess. In 1997, Willis was producing and starring in a romantic sports comedy called Broadway Brawler, about an aging hockey player getting a shot at romance and second chances. Production went sideways, and a couple weeks in, Willis wasn't happy. Since he was also a producer, he started firing people, including the director and cinematographer. A replacement stepped in and barely got anything usable. Disney looked at the millions already sunk into it and pulled the plug. Now Willis had an expensive problem. Disney had a serious damages claim, and rather than drag it through court, they cut a deal. Willis would star in 3 Disney movies at a steep discount. His going rate back then was around $20 million a film. He took a sliver of that for Armageddon, The Sixth Sense, and The Kid. So one of the quietest, saddest, most restrained performances of his career happened because he owed the studio. The Sixth Sense became the biggest hit of his life by a country mile. He got steered into it to settle a debt, and the box office had other plans. There you have it, everyone. 15 weird facts about The Sixth Sense.
Which one got you?
Drop it in the comments, and share this with that one friend who still swears they saw the ending coming, but of course they did. Nobody did. That's the whole point. Subscribe and ring the bell so the next deep dive sneaks up on you too. And until next time.